No, you're muted, Charlie.
Charlie, you're muted, big guy.
Okay, how am I now?
Perfect. Go ahead. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Sorry again. We've got good morning, everybody, and I'm glad that you're here. This is welcome to the 26th Paparelli Zoom chat for entrepreneurs. I really appreciate you all coming. We've taken a couple of weeks off, and as you can see, I'm in a new location here. In my building, it looks like the fire department is going to be testing fire alarms all day long. And this wasn't going to be, that would be a massive interruption. So I found this quieter environment through my friend and editor, Greg Hinthorn. This is his setup. And hopefully this new borrowed setup will work smoothly, or hopefully I won't just screw it up. But so far, I think we've worked out, because we came a little early, we worked a lot of this out. So we are all here as entrepreneurs helping entrepreneurs. A couple of weeks ago, we discussed leading in a revenue crisis with my friend Chris Cornell, who's the founder of Booster. And his forecast for March of this year went from $100 million to zero, literally in a day. And he survived by making hard decisions based on good information to protect his business. And what really amazed me is how he did it with such amazing compassion, because it involved a lot of people's lives and a lot of people's incomes. So today he's growing again. He's growing rapidly. You know, God bless him for all that he's been through. And there were a ton of lessons from that, and that I took away from that conversation. And it's one that I would recommend that you maybe pass around or rewatch, because there's so much to be learned from that on how to navigate in difficult times. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel, by the way, at zoom.paparelli.com. Just view a video and then subscribe. And then if you would, share it with a friend. I'd appreciate that if you'd help me build this channel up a bit. Every week, we do have great ideas and great insights that come from these interviews with these entrepreneurs, because together, what we're aiming to be is stronger. Use the, if you would, just a quick instruction, use the Zoom chat feature to ask questions. John Marshall is monitoring the chat for us, and he'll jump in if the question that you're asking is appropriate for the conversation at the time. If not, he's going to hold those questions until we conclude the chat at 9:45, and then we go into a Q&A. At that point, he'll call on you so you can ask your own question. Today's topic is getting to the quick exit 9 years later. My entrepreneur's thought of the day from the Bible is, those who accepted his message were baptized, and about 3,000 were added to their number that day. And that's from the book of Acts 2:41. My application here is that was the introduction speech, if you will, to Christianity by Peter the Apostle. It took 2,000 years after that speech to get to 2.5 billion Christians. That speech ended with 3,000 people coming to accept Jesus as Lord and Savior. So I think that the apostles thought things were going to go a lot more quickly, but it did take 2,000 years to get to 2.5 billion. And so building a sustainable business and sustainable value always takes more time than you think. If you're interested in attending a Bible study with me, which I hold on Thursday afternoons from noon to 1, just send an email to me at charlie@paparelli.com, and I'll add you to that invoice and that invite list. So let's get started. Richard and I we were in a business together. Richard started it. I joined him later. It was a business called Management Control Systems. And it took, from the time I joined, it took 4 years to get to an exit, and an additional 3 years to actually hit the earnout, for a total of 7 years to realize the full value of that business. I'm in a deal now that's been in place from beginning over 14 years, and it continues to build value, but most of my successful deals have been between 8 and 12 years to exit. I contrast that with those of us who've been around for the dot-com days. In the dot-com days, after Netscape went public on zero revenue with $1 billion valuation, everybody started saying that you can start a company and flip it in a couple of years and become a multimillionaire. And we all started believing it. And now I find many of the inexperienced entrepreneurs still think that way. They think they could start a business in 2 to 3 years. They're just going to be taken out. But that's just not the way it works. And today we're fortunate to have a successful, battle-scarred, and experienced entrepreneur. John Hanger is a friend, and he's the only entrepreneur I think I know in Atlanta that hails from Montana. You know, he was there before Ted Turner actually made Montana famous, I think. John's an electrical engineer who built his wealth by building companies and selling them. In 2004, he started a company called, maybe it was 2005, started a company called Contact At Once. He was sure it was going to be a big hit, and it was. It was just a big hit long after he thought it would be a big hit. It took a long time to get that business to an exit. Then he had a hit right on the heels of that in Car 360, which happened in literally 11 months. So these are the deals we're going to be talking about today. Our topic is getting to the quick exit after 9 years, or the real conversation is going to be around the perseverance and lucky breaks that it takes to get to an exit. So John, thanks for joining us. If you would unmute, I'd appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Charlie.
I'm so glad that you're here. Thanks for giving back to the community.
And thank you.
Yeah, you're a good man. So, you know, one of the things, you're the second person that I've met that went to this Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology. All right. So I'm just curious, the first person I met, by the way, two really intelligent guys, you and this other fellow named Courtney Alexander. Courtney is a patent attorney here in town, mechanical engineer from Rose-Hulman, and then a patent attorney here as a litigator. Brilliant, brilliant man. And so you guys found this place. I mean, how did you find this place from Montana?
Well, yeah, that's a fair question. I've got 3 in college right now and 1 that's already graduated college. And I would summarize by saying that the college selection process in my family growing up in Montana was very different than it was for my kids. And I think for most kids these days, my parents did not attend college. My 3 older sisters, only one of them attended college. She got a music degree, and my parents thought that was fine, but you know, that wasn't really their goal. Their goal was to have at least one of the kids get a quote unquote real degree. And so by the time I was looking for college, they were sort of running the process, and they wanted me to go to the absolutely best college I could get accepted to, no matter where it was. Rose-Hulman is perennially one of the top all engineering schools in the country for undergrad. Oh. It's sort of not well known outside of the Midwest, but in engineering circles, it's well known. And I got accepted there. I was not at all excited about it. At the time, it was about 1,400 students, all male, all engineering. So it wasn't high on my list, but my parents basically, you know, to honor them, I did go. And it turned out to be a great decision. It's a great school, got a great education.
How large was the population of the town that you grew up in?
About 60,000. It's a 3rd largest city in Montana.
Oh, okay, good. I thought maybe you were going to tell me that you grew up in a town of 800, but yet you weren't excited about a student population of 1,400. Okay.
Yeah, well, about the same size as my high school, actually, Rose-Hulman was. So.
Did you apply to Georgia Tech? I had to ask that question for Ben Dyer on the call.
No. The other finalists were like Rensselaer Polytechnic and a couple of Ivy League schools. So.
All right. So when you get out of there, with an electrical engineering degree. You know, what was your vision for your career back then for these younger entrepreneurs that are on this call?
Well, my vision during school was to honor my parents and get that degree. Yeah. I worked in engineering and applied optics during the summer between my junior and senior year, and in an internship, and that kind of solidified my view that wasn't what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So that was a really rough conversation with my parents during my senior year when I explained to them that.
What did you see that you didn't like?
Well, I just never felt like that was. You know, I mean, I could do it. I was an okay student, but I just didn't really enjoy it. I was just more of a hands-on sort of person, needed more more activity, more diversity in the day-to-day. And so I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I just knew I didn't want to do engineering. So I went to work for what's now Accenture, doing consulting. Kind of a funny story. Rose-Hulman being a great school, they track, or at least back then would track each year how the senior class did, and they would publish all sorts of statistics about average starting salary, minimum, maximum, et cetera, et cetera. So after graduation, after taking that job, they came out with the data about my class, and all sorts of data. But the chart I remember was it showed the range of all the starting salaries, lowest to highest, with mean and average and so on. And the lowest starting salary I recognized because it was mine. Back then consulting was you're going to work for an audit and tax firm, and consulting was my other offers in engineering type roles were probably double what I got starting at
What was your starting salary?
$22,000 in 1987.
And so these engineers that you graduated with, they were making 40?
Yeah, and some of my peers that got electrical engineering physics degrees were starting in the 70s. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, that must have made your parents proud. That's good. So that's your first good decision. But you did.
Yeah.
You didn't become an engineer. You actually were an engineer, but you didn't practice engineering.
Correct.
And so how do you move from consulting, and kind of short form question here to give us a little bit of a bridge, but you move from consulting to company leadership?
Yep.
How did that happen? This is where I was asking, what was your vision for your career? Did you have a vision, or was it something that you just got pulled along and into?
Yeah, I did not have a clear vision when I went into the consulting side, but within 2 years, I sort of found my passion, and it was you don't control what projects you get assigned to at a big consulting firm, but I was just fortunate enough to get assigned to a project inside Andersen where they had a software business unit that built what at that time, some of you are old enough to remember the MRP2 world as it was evolving into the ERP world. Uh-huh. And at the ripe age of 24, I was sort of thrown in the deep end to be the think of it as lead product manager for building a new ERP product for the chemical and food manufacturing industries. And so I did that for probably 3 years within Andersen, built the product, then evolved into sort of a marketing pre-sales role, rolling it out in the US, then lived in Belgium for a year as we rolled it out in Europe. And just got tremendous experience, but also really found my passion. I mean, I just really, really enjoyed creating a product and then taking it to market, figuring out what the market needed to hear.
How do you break out of the consulting business? How do you break out of an Andersen?
Well, so I was part of that software unit for the 5.5 years roughly I was at Andersen, and then through connections I got an offer to go be a part of a startup that was basically in the similar space, in ERP space, and I took it, and I was employee 4.
Was it company. Were they in the manufacturing space?
Yep, ERP for process manufacturers, a company called Adage Systems. Yep. Had my first exit, and then fast forward 6 companies later, here we are.
Were you running that company?
No, I was employee 4. I think my original title was like regional manager, which is when you have 4 employees, you can kind of make up your title to whatever you want it to be.
You had an exit.
But we had an exit in about 2.5 years. Yep. We sold to a company, a publicly traded company out of Philadelphia for about $15 million on about $2 million in revenue at the time. And so that was the beginning of it.
All right. So then you had various roles that they kind of moved you up from sort of product management into, eventually you were running a couple of companies. Yep. The most recent deal, I want to kind of jump to the most recent deal that you just came out of, okay, was Car 360. And it's very painful for me to talk about Car 360. And you know why? I mean, I was joined with, I was called into a meeting with a bunch of angels who were given the opportunity to invest in Car 360 at a very, very reasonable valuation. And I passed on the deal. And the reason I passed on the deal is Car 360 couldn't sort of find its way. And I've known the company for a while. And there was one guy that was getting paid an enormous amount of money, who was a technology guy. And I said, nobody in a startup should get paid that kind of money. So I passed on the deal. what was it? 13 months later, you exited the deal and everybody made 4X on that. And they got paid stock. And of course it was Carvana that bought you out. And that now Carvana stock is just like through the roof. Okay.
It's
So
up about 10x over where it was at the time of the acquisition. Yeah.
yeah, there you go. Great. Yeah. So that's why this is so painful.
Not to rub it in or
Tell us
anything.
tell us, so you were in the automotive business through Contact at Once, but how did you tell us how you came around after exiting Contact at Once, you got into Car 360? How did that work out?
Yeah, well, actually, probably many of you on this session deserve some credit indirectly, because it really comes back to Venture Atlanta in a sense. I had just wrapped up my role at Live Person, which had acquired my prior company, Contact at Once. Was attending Venture Atlanta as an angel investor, and just looking to sort of come back up for air and reintegrate with the community. While attending, I saw Bruno Francois, who's the founder of Car 360 Present, in front of the Venture Atlanta audience. Being automotive, I thought it was interesting. I thought the technology was interesting. So I met with Bruno on the sidelines of Venture Atlanta, and that started sort of a relationship where Bruno increasingly looked to me for some advice and guidance.
Was he focused that time on automotive?
He was.
So that's why you became interesting to him.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay.
And
right.
You said it in a kind way. I mean, he was I would just say wandering a little bit. Mark Cuban had invested in his company. They'd pivoted to focus on automotive, but and had some success, but we're struggling, desperately needed cash. Bruno's a brilliant inventor, mad scientist type entrepreneur, but hadn't really had a lot of experience running or growing a company. And so I was able to start guiding them a little bit. And then long story short, ultimately I, along with Mark Cuban, provided a bridge round, and I agreed to come on as the CEO to help raise the A round. We were able to do that in about 4 months' time through the period that you passed on it. And then we started growing the company, growing revenues pretty aggressively. Made a sales call on Carvana as a potential customer, and they ended up being an acquirer instead of a customer.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I think it's really important that what we need as sort of inventors or as technology guys, we need, when we focus on a market, to get that next round of funding, we need somebody like you who has that market experience and those contacts. And that what I saw with you when you gave the presentation was that confidence that you had. It was almost a smugness about, I understand this business and this is going to work out and it's going to be successful. And it was like, wow. And it was. So congratulations on that deal. But Contact at Once didn't move that quickly for you. Okay. Give us a little bit, just something I picked up off of your LinkedIn, which I thought, I didn't know this about Contact at Once, is you said it was the fastest growing software company in North America for 2 years running, and that's an incredible thing to say. And the other is a top place to work in Atlanta for 2 years. And that eventually it ended up with 18,000 customers. Those are incredible numbers. So where did this whole idea come from?
Yep. Well,
I know you're a co-founder. You're not the founder, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yep. Co-founder was there on day one of the company, but was not the original idea guy. Mark Hayes was the original idea guy.
Okay.
And his original idea boiled down to this. If you think back to 2005, right, we didn't yet have Slack or many of the messaging tools that all of us count on today. But there were early messaging products like Yahoo Instant Messenger and AOL Instant Messenger. And this idea of presence where you could look at your roster and you could see your friend and there'd be a green dot if they were online or a red dot if they were offline, and you could instantly know whether somebody was there. And Mark's idea in a nutshell was, what if we could bring that into the world of advertising, such that a consumer looking at a site, for example, autotrader.com, could see that there's actually somebody at the dealership right now who could answer a question that you might have while shopping for a car. And if we could project that green dot or the equivalent of it onto a site, would that increase the conversion, the number of people that would engage with an auto dealer? And sure enough, I mean, we ran some early tests across a variety of industries, and it
Well,
did.
So you tested in a variety of industries?
We did. Our first year, we were trying to figure out what industry vertical to really like place our bet on, because we knew we couldn't be everything to everybody out of the gates. We hoped to be everything to everybody eventually, but we knew we had to, focus initially. And so we did some testing across a variety of industries and selected automotive as the first place to.
How did you test like that to come up with automotive?
Well, it was a lot of work. We had to come up with a.
You've got a product that you say, I can work for a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
So, but you were smart enough that you had to kind of narrow it. You focused down, because one of the things that I find as an angel investor, I can always count on when I talk to somebody with a technology and without a market, is I always say, you've got to focus. Okay.
Right.
How did you know to do that?
Well, I'd say that came from the previous 4 startups that I've been a part of, right? I mean, I like you, I learned that early on that, focus is key. You've only got so many resources. You really need to figure out where to place your bets. So that was a big part of, I would say, what I brought.
The business that you came out of was not in automotive, right?
Correct. It was more enterprise software.
Enterprise software. Okay. So how did you meet Mark?
Mark and I were introduced through not even a mutual friend, but sort of a friend of a friend. Mark also was a former Accenture guy, or at the time was still an Accenture guy. He had been there. He started the same time I did. We never knew each other. He'd been there for 18 years and had built an incredible reputation and career at Accenture. Had this idea, wanted to leave, but had a hard time leaving. Honestly, probably the single most amazing accomplishment I did during Contact at Once was after Mark and I got to talking and he shared with me his idea. I mean, he got cold feet. He had a great career, really big paycheck from Accenture, and he almost didn't leave. But I'd gotten so excited by that point. Probably my best sales job ever was to convince him to leave to start the company that he wanted to start. Sounds kind of odd, but that's the truth.
I don't know that that's odd. I think that somebody's there for 18 years. I think this is something that makes it different. So this guy's now, he's got to be 40, 41 probably when that happened.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yep.
So he's got the sort of the wife, the kids, the house, the cars, the full catastrophe kind of a deal. Right. So,
Correct.
and so here he's got all that. To kind of come out of that is very, very difficult for people to make that move. As an angel, that was one of the things that I always had provided, was I give you sort of a safety net to kind of get started. What was the safety net that you were going to provide besides being enthusiastic?
Well, that's probably about it, actually.
No kidding.
Enthusiasm plus experience.
He stepped into no paycheck.
Correct. If I remember correctly, he went without a paycheck for at least 6 months. I went out without for probably a year or longer, and our third co-founder wasn't in a position to go without, but went on next to nothing for at least 6 months or a year.
All right. So I just want to kind of go back to, again, how did you choose automotive? Because this is a really important, it's an important question to answer, because I say there's a lot of entrepreneurs, like I said, they see, I've got a technology everyone can use, so therefore I should sell to everyone.
Yeah.
And to come to one and say, I'm just going to do that. That's a hard way. That's very hard to get to. So how did you get to it?
Well, we just took that first year to find some early customers, even free customers that would just allow us to get some data, right? And we tested in what was then the online yellow pages or local search space. We tested in automotive. We tested in multifamily or apartment space. We tested in the real estate space. And automotive, just based on the small amount of data we were able to gather, was the most promising. So we decided to focus on.
What was attractive about automotive to you?
Well, again, it was just testing consumer response, and what we saw was that that consumer conversion off of ads that had this presence concept in it was way higher. I mean, we're talking in some cases double conversion of what they would get with the traditional lead forms or phone numbers, and that was a pretty powerful value proposition. So we went with it.
Now, just so people understand, as I understand it, what you've done is you were selling to automotive dealers.
Well, it was this was an interesting and powerful part of the business model. Actually, was the go-to-market. Very proud of it, because I think that was the key to our success. There were at that point already plenty of companies that sold basic, like web chat to anybody that would buy it. what we decided to do was take a little different tack. So we built a bunch of features that were very specific to third-party sites. So in automotive, that would be autotrader.com, cars.com, cargurus.com, sites like that, that dealers advertise on, right? And so we would sell, let's say, to an autotrader.com as our customer, with the value proposition that we would greatly increase the conversion of the ads that they were selling to the dealers. Therefore, they were happy to pay us a license fee because we were essentially enhancing their value proposition. Then, as a second wave, if you will, we would come behind that, having acquired all these dealers that advertised on a site like autotrader.com or cars.com. We would come behind to those dealers and say, hey, this is working great for you on these third-party sites. Wouldn't you like to add it to your own website? And we would sell a separate license then to the dealers that would work on their own website. So it was a sort of a multi-faceted go-to-market that ended up working really well for us, because it put gravity on the side of our direct salespeople that were going to the dealers. We already had an in with the
Well,
dealers.
if I was working as a salesperson for you, who did I call and what did I say?
We had really two different sales teams. One small team that called on the auto traders of the world that said, hey, we've got a platform tailor built for sites like yours that'll increase the conversion of your ads and therefore make your advertising more valuable, allow you to charge more, allow you to retain more of your existing.
And who did the other guy sell to?
And then the other guy sold directly to the dealers. So they were coming behind and saying, hey, Mr. Dealer, you're already using this product to answer incoming conversations from consumers on AutoTrader or Cars or these other sites. Why don't you consider an additional license to put it on your own website?
And one of the things, say, John Marshall, maybe you could put up this this history by the numbers, which I think is kind of an interesting, it's sort of will give us a path to follow here. Yeah, I thought this was pretty cool. But I think it shows that it took, how long did it take? 5 years to get to $1 million in recurring revenue?
Roughly, yeah.
5 years. So you bounce it along. But at some point you said, so take me along the journey here a little bit. You eventually talked Mark into joining the company.
Yeah. January 2005. That's the other thing that's not really clear on this chart is we sort of cut off the first year, right? So there's actually, we founded the company in January of 2005. So there's a full year missing from the left-hand side of zeros.
Wow.
So
what was the pricing model? And when you put the pricing model in place to get to $1 million in annual recurring revenue, did the pricing model change very much, or did you? What was the average deal that you were shooting for in a SaaS company?
Yeah, in the with those small number of large deals like an auto trader, it was very much like enterprise software. I mean, it was a function of how many dealers did they have and so on. So those weren't really price list type things. But for the dealers, we started out $150 a month type subscription with the SaaS model. By the time we exited, we'd grown that to probably between $400 and $500 a month by adding additional features, adding additional services, and so on. But fundamentally, the pricing didn't change. The price point changed, and obviously, as we became a market leader, we were able to leverage that to charge a little bit of a premium.
I think that's one of those things. If you would have told me, we're gonna charge $100 to $150 a month on a SaaS model, I'll say you're never gonna make it. And what you did eventually got to, instead of $1,200 a year, you got to $5,000 a year as an average deal, and that makes a huge difference as far as the economics go of the deal. Plus you had the enterprise piece. But what happened? How do you stay together for 5 years as you crawled to $1 million ARR?
Well, consistent progress, right? Like we never, unlike the other 5 startups that I've been a part of, 3 as CEO, we never really had a pivot. Amazingly, over this entire period, the model basically stayed the same. It materialized a little bit slower than we thought. If you would ask us to draw this graph pro forma at founding, we probably would have had it in increments of months rather than quarters here. But it never, as you can see, right? I mean, we just made solid progress, and we just stayed focused on hitting incremental goals and moving the ball down the field, and that was the key to.
But you kind of starving, right? I mean, you're kind of starving along the way, if you will. I mean, everything's going back into the business. The business isn't generating much revenue, and so what was the toughest time for you personally in those early? Those early
Well,
years.
probably on here where you see the heart attack question mark comment in 2006. I had a health episode where it turned out to not be a heart attack, but I was sitting in an emergency room and was told I was having a heart attack while it was happening. Turns out it was an infection of the lining around my heart. But that was a little scary. Beyond that, I mean, there was lots of stories I could tell, but personally, that was probably the
Well, what would you share with entrepreneurs? You know, it's because you think you're onto something that's really big, but the numbers aren't showing that you're onto something really big.
Yeah.
So what would you tell entrepreneurs on, you know, sticking with other entrepreneurs? What can you share with other entrepreneurs that, you know, sometimes you just got to stick with it?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's, you know, you got to believe in your partners, you got to believe in your business plan, and you know, in a situation where it's moving a little more slowly like that, I mean, it's a test of that faith. But you know, I had two really strong, committed co-founders, and together we were just, you know, stayed with it, and
Well,
thankfully we were
of all
rewarded
the
that.
co-founders, the three of you, nobody wanted to step out of line and say, nobody kind of came in one day, like I did once to Richard Brock, and say, where in the heck is this thing? We're dying here. Okay. You know, like I'm not making any money. I need money.
Yeah, well, we were a team, so you know, it wasn't like you know, they came to me as the CEO, and you know, I'm not like a cult of personality type CEO where people, you know, the whole company's culture revolves around my personality or how I'm feeling that day or whatever, right? It truly was a team, and you know, we would get together and share our innermost thoughts and frustrations, but at the end of the day, we were all committed to each other and committed to seeing it through, and it worked out.
When did you get to the point where you said, you know, this really is going to be, you know, ultimately, just to let everybody know, you sold, as you could see from the chart, you sold for $66 million. You know,
Yeah.
you are crawling along those first 5 years, and 66 million is so far off. I mean, that wasn't even a dream. Okay.
Right.
So you were probably happy that you got to profitability. But you know when did you know that you really did something break in the market or something happen that says this is going to hit an inflection point? This is going to be big.
I think, you know, once we got to sort of 2010, we had a lot of momentum. We were getting the Inc. 500 awards and fastest growing awards and all that, and we built a nice culture. Had built a really great team that was all aligned to the mission. And so I would say, you know, by 2010, 5 years in, we at that point we were pretty confident that, you know, we were building a winning company. We weren't ready to exit at that point. When we went out to raise our Series B round in 2012, there was an interesting set of circumstances. You know, we'd been very capital efficient up to that point. We'd only raised $1.5 million, right? So we're now, you know, 6-7 years into this thing. We're very profitable, and you know, we've got all sorts of new growth ambitions into other verticals. We eventually did go into real estate. We went into multifamily. We went internationally in the UK and Australia. So we're growing in all these dimensions, and we wanted more capital to fuel that. So we got to raise the B round in 2012, and through that process, there was a potential acquirer that came along. We weren't looking for it, but here comes a potential acquirer, puts a term sheet on the table that was pretty attractive. And
what kind of number to put in front of you?
It was about if I remember correctly, about a $25 million acquisition, which at the time was a really nice multiple for us. We debated it. We didn't have any institutional money at the time, so we didn't have to, you know, discuss it with any institutional investors. It was a long debate. It wasn't like, you know, is it enough or not enough? It was more like, do we want to exit now, or do we want to keep going with this thing? And ultimately, it was a really hard time, actually, emotional time for us all. But we ultimately decided, okay, let's sell it. So we signed the term sheet after negotiating a few things. We sent it in just before midnight. And then the next morning we wake up and I got a call from the CEO of the potential acquirer, and he's like, some things happened on our end and we've changed our mind. We're not going to sign the term sheet. So we've gone through this.
Because I was going to say, I don't believe that that the three of you could come to a conclusion that you're not going to sell the business for $25 million.
Yeah.
So
So,
you decided to do it, and then the buyer backed out.
right. So there's like this huge emotional letdown, right? Because for anybody who's been through that, I mean, there's just a lot of things that go
Yeah,
through
you're
your mind.
multiplying your percentage times the 25, right?
Right. So we had to regroup. We had to refocus the team. We raised the B round, and then here's the funny part of the story: is 2 years later, 2016, the company that acquired this live person is actually the same company that backed out of that term sheet 2 years earlier. And so instead of 25 million, they paid us 66 plus a $5 million earnout, so 71 million 2 years later.
Well, congratulations on that. That's a spectacular result. Okay. From any angle that we look at it. But what was the pre-money on since this guy backed out at 25 million, what was the pre-money on that B round that you talked about?
Oof. I don't remember off the top of my head, Charlie.
I was just wondering if you use that as a marker to say, look, this guy was willing to buy it for 25, so we're going to set the price at 25.
Yeah, it wasn't anywhere near that. I know that the lead investor on that round was Fulcrum here locally.
Oh, they were. Okay.
Frank Dalton came on the board, and Frank's been a longtime friend. They were just an awesome partner. I don't think they got like the deal of the century, but they definitely didn't come in at 25. I'm pretty sure.
Okay. One question, you kind of skipped over this pretty quickly. You said you went to other markets.
Yes.
You said we went into real estate and some other things. It's very, very difficult once you're in a market, a vertical market, like as you were automotive, now you're in it pretty deep, to kind of look and say, well, now we can kind of expand to other verticals.
Yes.
You make it sound like, oh, it was so easy. Was that easy?
I wouldn't say it was easy, but we were successful at it. I mean, at the time of the acquisition.
What did you learn from that? What did you learn from going from a single vertical, trying to move your product into the next vertical?
Well, number one, you have to have, I think, a focused sales team, because it's different messaging, different customer profiles. So we built a separate sales team for the different verticals. From a product perspective,
so now that's the outward facing, right? So that's customer facing. So you need a sales team, but you also have the sales team sitting here and saying, man, you look at our website, everything's automotive. All of our references, they're all automotive.
Yep.
Everybody in this whole place thinks automotive.
Right.
Now you want me to sell a real estate?
Yep. So you gotta evolve all your marketing stuff. You gotta figure out how to do that in a logical way, so your website can lead people down the path that makes it feel like it's been tailored for their industry and for them. That's fairly common in SaaS. I would say one of the bigger challenges is the product side, right? It really forces you to have a more disciplined product management approach, because at the end of every dev cycle, there's a set of decisions that have to be made in terms of priority, right? And instead of just like this feature for automotive versus this feature for automotive, now it's that plus, do we put in this other one for real estate above it or below the automotive? Automotive obviously is going to have the bigger revenue impact because it's already a huge business, but you got to from a discipline perspective, picking and choosing what you're going to prioritize where was something we had to develop. I think we did a pretty good job of it.
Did it take longer than you thought it would to get to that second vertical?
No, I think we got there as quick as I expected. I think we were just starting to really grow. I mean, if I remember correctly, real estate was maybe a $2 million part of our 22 million in trailing revenue at the time of the acquisition. So it was still 10% of the revenue.
How long
we got there quickly?
How long were you in the real estate vertical before it got to the 2 million?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
So when did you start in the real estate vertical? When did you
Yep.
expand from automotive to real estate? And then how long did it take to get to the
Gotcha. Yeah. I don't remember exact dates, but I'm going to say, roughly 2 years to get to that 2 million.
That's pretty good, man. Because I'm telling you, moving from one vertical to the next, it sounds logical, but it's enormously difficult. So
I agree. Yeah, it wasn't easy, but
So let me ask you, what was the greatest impediment? We need to kind of move this to the end, but what was the greatest impediment to your growth? So you take on this money from Fulcrum. What was the greatest impediment? Because now the expectation is you're going to scale.
Yeah.
So what was
Uh,
the impediment to growth for you after the money came in? So we could put the money aside. Okay.
yeah, I would say the single biggest impediment was culture. My experience, across my career has been at, small, medium-sized startups.
Right.
This is the first time, certainly first time as CEO, but really first time even in any role where the company had scaled. Let's say we were roughly 200 employees in 2016. And my observation was, like I was able to build a really great culture up to about 150 or so, because it was basically a family culture, right? Like we're all in this together, and we had great alignment. Once you get somewhere in that 150, 200, it gets a lot harder. And I was ready to maybe even check out and bring in a CEO that sort of specialized in that next phase, because I felt like, like my specialty was quickly appearing in the rearview mirror.
So how do you get past it?
Well, as it turns out, we got the offer and sold the company. But had it not been for that,
Okay.
had it
But
not
that's
been for
really
that,
astute of you. I tell you, I admire you, because that's astute of you to say, look, I kind of I've kind of come to the I've come to the end of myself, in effect. I'm really good at what I did. I took it to here, but I'm not the guy to take it to the next stage.
yeah,
And
I hadn't quite reached that conclusion, but that's where it was headed for sure.
but then that gets you, especially Fulcrum would have helped you with this too, because you get to a point where you say, all right, well, now we could bring in somebody else. And now I'm betting on that person. All my equity is bet on that person to take me forward, right?
Right.
And
That's
that
right.
is the biggest risk in any startup. There's no risk at the beginning, because if it doesn't work, you didn't have anything to start with. But now you have something that is worth north of $25 million, somewhere north of 25 million. And
Right.
you say, wow, that's a pretty big bet to bring a new guy in, right? So
Yeah.
that's why a lot of people, I think of, that's what I see is a lot of my experiences. That's where the entrepreneurs say, look, I want out. I don't want to take that next bet.
Right.
What the last one question is, what was the greatest accelerator to that growth besides the money?
Well, clearly, putting together the deals with the likes of Cars.com and AutoTrader being the two biggest. There were others, in that were their competitors, but those are at that time were the two big boys. And being able to put together those deals was amazing, and it was clearly the accelerator that drove the ongoing growth of the business.
You had built enough credibility in the marketplace with these all these cats and dogs, if you will, right? That you finally got that big enterprise sale, and that brings in the big bucks.
Yeah, and well, and we'll just one more comment to add some color to that. The hard part, like, yes, it's an enterprise sale. We had a compelling value proposition, but the hardest part was, we're talking about convincing two head-to-head competitors that they should adopt the same startup's technology platform and make it basically the de facto industry standard. That was the hardest part, right? Like, compelling them to work with either one of them with us was straightforward, because we had a compelling value proposition. Convincing both of them to work with us and make us the de facto industry standard without, like, private labeling it or taking an ownership stake in our company. These were all the discussions that happened, but we knew that to make our model work, we had to not become associated with any one of them, yet win them both as customers. And we were able to pull that off, and that was the key accelerator.
Last quick question for a quick answer, okay? Is so I forgot, what was the name of the Car 360 founder?
Bruno Francois.
Bruno, right. So how long was Bruno? It took you 13 months from the moment you joined the company to sold it to Carvana. How long did it take Bruno to get that exit from when he founded the company?
Bruno founded the company in, as I recall, late 2011. So for him to exit was roughly 7 years, 6, 7 years.
There you go again, 7 years. That 7,
Yep.
8 year kind of thing keeps coming up here. Well, hey man, I really appreciate you doing this, John. This has been it's been a great interview, and I appreciate you also sticking around for people to ask their questions that they
My
have.
pleasure.
It's interesting what came to mind for me, and I'm always sort of like investing as an early stage investor. I'm always investing in teams, and I think it's just amazing that the three of you stood together with this through thick and thin as you were building this business, for that length of time. Extraordinary. It was almost 10 years. You said it was 9 years and 11 months to get to that exit.
Correct.
And to keep a team together, the original founding team together, respecting each other and still staying in your roles, to build is just an incredibly difficult thing to do. And it just shows how hard it is to get to an exit. I mean, and that's just one of the things that had to go right. One of the big things, but one of the things. So I compliment you on doing such a great job with that.
Yeah,
Now,
I should give a shout out to Scott Bogarts. I mentioned Mark. Scott Bogarts was the other Contact at Once co-founder. He's the technical wizard who really built the whole platform.
Wow, that's pretty good. Well, congratulations to Mark. And what was his name?
Scott Bogarts.
Scott and Mark, congratulations. So that's my insight. And I know that you probably have some insights. If you would send them to me when we publish this on Friday morning, I will include your comments and I'll actually give you credit for that. So my weekly reminder is watch your cash. It goes out fast and comes in slow. So be sure that you learn fast, you decide fast, and you go fast. The next Zoom chat for entrepreneurs, my guest will be Brian Hill, who's the co-founder and CEO of Hip Nation. Hip Nation is saving companies and individuals 30 to 60% off of their healthcare insurance bill with a much better product than this standard Blue Cross Blue Shield type of insurance product. Our topic, though, is going to be counterculture selling. It is really hard. So please share this weekly Zoom chat with your peers. Help me grow this community. Sign in early to catch up with people. We did that today. We're always on 15 minutes earlier. And remember, I am praying for you. Thanks for attending. This is the end of the interview portion of the call. We'll now move to the Q&A. John Marshall will now be our moderator. At 10 a.m., I'll end this Zoom conference call. John Marshall, it's all yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Charlie, and thank you, John. Actually, John, I have a question for you, if I could.
Sure.
On the $22 million deal that you got that dreaded phone call that morning, how long before that did you think you had a deal on the table and that you were anticipating this term sheet?
Yeah, it was probably a 2-week process from when we got the original term sheet and negotiated and worked on a few of the details around the edge of the term sheet before we got to that deadline.
And then when you got that call, what did you do to pump yourself back up to keep on going? Because that had to have been a call you weren't expecting.
Yeah, it was hugely deflating, and it was one of the more difficult things I can remember professionally in terms of I'm by nature I'm sort of a level type person, but I was very down. I know the entire team was probably even more down than me, and I remember just taking the day that we found out that news, literally like taking the day off to try to just mourn it, if you will, and then move on very quickly because I knew we needed to do that.
The day you went to the emergency room?
No, that was years earlier, but yeah, it would have been appropriate.
Yeah. All right. Go ahead, John.
You and I actually met through, and so if I can, someone wants to ask a little more personal question. You and I actually met through a Christian school. Eric wants to ask you, as a Christian, what does he think? Well, Eric, why don't you go ahead and ask, please? Eric, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes. Okay, I'm unmuted. Hi, John.
Hi,
Appreciated that. Hey, John, I know Charlie doesn't make any kind of requirement that we're Christians, so I'm not making any presuppositions. So if you don't like the language, you can change it, okay? But I just happened to be on a study this morning, and we were talking all about gifts and calling, and and it was so valuable there was only about 9 of us, and we really got to know each other better. So
Right.
I think that's kind of the preamble. I wondered, because I can't express it myself, so I thought I'd ask you, when I'm looking at you, what do you think your main gift is? Your main gift?
My main gift, I think fundamentally leadership is probably it. I am a Christian, and I have participated in the Bible studies there at ATV that Charlie organizes. I see many of you that I recognize from those. Been a part of high tech ministries for years. But for me, my faith is central to who I am and what I do, and I try to leverage the leadership positions I've been blessed with to be an ambassador for Christ, but not necessarily in a overt or uncomfortable way, right? Like more like salt and light type way, and that is part of my calling as well, I think, and how God expects me to use that gifting.
Yeah, well, John, I think that you proved that, the secular question for that Eric, would be, what's your superpower, right?
Yeah.
John has really shown that, when he convinced Mark to leave Accenture after 18 years in his career, that shows it, and also see how he pulled people together so quickly to get that funding for Car 360. So you really do, leadership is your superpower. That's pretty cool. Go ahead, John. Sorry.
I think, and John, Bailey's got a question relative to a hurdle that you knocked over, you were able to cross. Bailey?
Hey, John.
Hey, Bailey.
You mentioned one of the toughest things was getting two head-to-head competitors who were somewhat peers to both use you. I've got kind of a similar situation with 3 right now, and so I'm really curious how you did it.
Well, I'm not sure there's a magic formula, but I would say if I had to boil it down, the hardest part was saying no, right? Because each of those companies came to us with really attractive offers to buy a stake of our company or do things that would make us much closer partners, which in and of themselves were attractive, but would not allow us to execute on our original model of becoming sort of the de facto industry standard platform. And so it was hard to say no, right? I mean, we had to say no to some things that on paper were pretty attractive, but we had to keep the faith in what our original model was and what we needed to do to execute on it in order to say no and take a chance on losing the business, yet still convince them that by saying no, we were actually saying yes. We just wanted a different set of terms and sort of persuading them that why it would still be in their best interest, even if they didn't own a chunk of our company, to make us the industry de facto standard.
Great.
So it sounds like step
ahead,
one
Dave.
was having it written down, like what the strategy was.
Correct. Yep.
Hey, thank you, Bailey, for that question. I tell you, John, it was very, very helpful. I know everyone here really enjoyed it, and you have answered everyone's questions, man. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, John.
I will open it up. Does anybody else have a question before we just kind of close this out? Because we do have still just a couple of minutes. No?
I got one more.
Go ahead.
Another question, John. You talked about going to a second vertical. That was tough. Also about being able to raise pricing as you became the industry leader. How much did additional features, different products, expansion of existing customers, other than just charging them more on renewal, did that play a role too?
Absolutely, yeah. And I would say, that's a part of any SaaS business, right? Is figuring out a way to listen to your customers, add features that truly add value for them, that aren't just like superficial things that then allow you to justify increasing prices in a way that they're happy to pay for, right? I mean, that's the key. If you're just like, to me, there's a place for just raising the prices because you can. That's usually post B round when you got private equity involved and they're just trying to maximize the business. But in the early stages, it's less about that, and it's more about actually delivering value for your customers and finding solutions that can actually create new value. Makes it easy to ask for more money because they're happy to give it to you if you're actually creating value for them. That's
cool. I have one question that I failed to ask earlier that would be helpful for people that are getting teams together. Is you were, like you said, you didn't have the original idea. The guy that didn't want to leave the company that he was working for. Mm-hmm. When you finally pulled the deal together, how did you guys split the equity, that initial equity?
Yeah, it was off the top of my head, it was between the 3 of us. Mark, who's the original idea guy, was like 50%. I was like 35 and Scott was like 15
Okay.
as sort of the technical
How
guy
did
to
you?
come build it.
So what were the different roles that you had that made the team work so that there wasn't overlap?
Well, I was really, strategy, go to market. I mean, we all sort of contributed to everything. First of all, clear. It wasn't like, we went into different rooms and.
But everybody has a superpower, right? Otherwise, if everybody has the same superpower, you're setting yourself on fire,
Right. So, as CEO, for me, it was strategy, go to market, and building the sales side of the business. For Mark, it was owning the product. He worked very closely with Scott. Scott's more the hands-on, build it, architect it, whereas Mark was more the high level. Let's say they probably met at architecting, but Mark was more high level, like product manager type function. But we all contributed across the board to the company strategy, company culture, and I think that was why it was so successful.
Okay. How'd you
Great.
find? Yeah. So how did,
Actually, Mike Shutt wants to, Stevie's time for a quick question.
All right, thanks. Thanks, John. So Charlie, you had mentioned that I think it was in the investor pitch that you remember how confident John seemed during the pitch.
Mhm.
So my question, John, is did you feel that confident? Was that something you, and how do you think that, reflecting on yourself and how you approach those pitches, how do you think that it came off that you project yourself as being so confident?
Yeah, well, generally, I don't come off as all that confident. Like I'm like the anti-CEO in terms of my personality. I'm come across as sort of a humble person because fundamentally that's who I am. And I get that feedback a lot. Like you need to act more like a CEO. But in the case of Car 360, by that point I had been involved for roughly 6 months. I'd put money in, which is the ultimate vote that I believed in what the company was doing and the potential. And so, when I was up in front of the audience that day that Charlie was referencing, right? Like I had a clear view to how this company could be successful. We needed to raise some money to get there, but for me, I mean, there was no guarantee, but I had a pretty clear view of how we could build a successful company at that point.
And Huff's got one question here. We got time. Go Huff.
One thing on that though is I think
sorry.
there's a difference, by the way, between being a CEO natural promoter and being confident. Okay. And Mike, I think he's not a promoter. And that's what he keeps talking about. But I think, boy, he does have a level of confidence about him that's incredible. Yeah.
Huff, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I met John. I met you obviously when I placed you at Flamenco as a CMO before you actually became a CEO in that role. And what I recall about you that was so impressive was your ability from a product management, product marketing standpoint. You'd had that experience successfully before and really fine tuning what's the market, what's our solution and the value. And you didn't really talk a lot about that. It kind of sort of got brushed over here, but I think that's one of your strengths or your superpowers. And, I'm just curious as to when you with Car 360, because I know that, Contact at Once, that you were looking at these different verticals and slow to move into that. Just kind of want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And I guess maybe you're probably right. I mean, I think in terms of just professional strengths, I think understanding understanding markets and then how to go to market is something that I've learned over the years and have become pretty good at and pretty disciplined at. I think that's a skill that's often missing. I advise a lot of startups right now at this stage in my life, and so many of them are missing that. And it's not because there's a lack of appreciation for how important it is. I think there's just a lack of skills and experience out there for people who do that. It's really not a common skill. A lot of people think of marketing as just sort of the communications and branding and stuff and all that. But the most important part of marketing is actually the strategic part, understanding your market and then mapping a solution to it. And in the early stages, right? I mean, you have the opportunity to shape what your solution is. So understanding what the market is, what the market needs, and then rapidly adapting and building a solution to address those needs is a key part of any startup. Some people just get lucky and hit it. Other people, I think, are good at sort of divining how to do that, and that is something that I enjoy and that I think I'm pretty good at.
Cool.
Perfect.
Listen, folks,
Thank you.
we got to call an end to this. John, thank you so much.
Great.
John Hanger, John Marshall. I got too many Johns here. Okay. And to all of you who have attended, we thank you so much. Remember, next week, next Wednesday, November 4th, November 11th, rather, we're going to have a really interesting conversation with selling a phenomenal product, okay, against entrenched competitors with a tremendous ROI, in other words, selling a counterculturally. It's the most difficult sale that you can make. And we're going to learn a lot of lessons from this guy who's Brian Hill, who's been doing it for a while and being successful with it. So I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you all for coming, and you have a good rest of the week, a good weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Charlie and John.